An unpunished coup becomes a training exercise and a green light for their return to power. In 1923, Hitler was lightly punished for an attempted coup and was in power 10 years later. We should learn from that historical experience of fascism. January 6th was an attempt to retain a fascist leader in power. And when we talk about an acquittal leaving the door open to fascism, we aren't worried that fascism might just wander back in. It's bloodthirsty. They are already climbing through the windows and scaling the walls. Conviction is the least we can do. This week, the world will be watching to see if the rule of law will remain in the most powerful country in the world. That is what is at stake in whether Trump is convicted and held to account. And while right now it does not seem the conviction is likely, this too can change. The 2020 election was a showdown over the form of rule in this country. A second Trump term would have allowed a leap and rapid consolidation of fascism in the most powerful country in the world. Real possibilities of an escalation of ethnic cleansing at the border, unleashed white supremacist terror, anti-science lunacy, killing hundreds of thousands more from COVID. For months before the election, and for years when it comes down to it, Trump claims that any election he lost would be illegitimate, spread lies about immigrants voting illegally, and in plain sight, attempted to sabotage the election, from blackmailing the president of Ukraine to voter intimidation to disrupting the US Postal Service. After Trump lost the election, he refused to concede, even as lawsuit after lawsuit challenging the results were thrown out. His backers attempted to cancel millions of ballots from the largely Black urban voters of swing states. His rabid followers vowed to keep coming back to DC to fight for Trump, culminating in the storming of the Capitol on January 6th. That they did not succeed in overturning the election does not change what it was, a violent coup attempt by fascists in and out of government, fighting to stay in power so that they could rule over everyone else they hate with white supremacist, misogynistic, xenophobic terror. Many thought that Trump and Trumpism was over in the days following the coup attempt. It was extremely important and right that Nancy Pelosi fought for impeachment, underscoring, as she said, the danger is here in Congress. And conviction and barring from future office must be won. But since January 6th, there has been every effort to rewrite, forget, move on, change the subject. Fascism does not stop out of shame. It does not stop unless it is stopped. Instead, we have seen the battle over Trump's conviction become a medium for Trumpism, to reshape and reseize the initiative, consolidating the GOP into a fully fascist party. Fascist, yes, openly bloody dictatorship without even the pretense of rights for the people. This week, there is a monumental necessity and a real basis for an uncompromising fight for conviction. The full truth of what happened on January 6th and everything leading up to it must be exposed. The GOP's absolute disregard for the truth or objective reality or free and fair elections must be frontally taken on. Some are already arguing that because it looks extremely unlikely now that they will get 17 Republicans on board to win a conviction, that even waging an all-out fight in the trial over these questions is not worth it, or may even do harm. This is wrong. For one thing, you don't know in advance what can happen when a full-throated fight is waged. A stark case against Trump with evidence and testimony and a real political fight can change public opinion throughout the country. And a mass movement demanding conviction can be won through this. And if that is won, then that could, even if it seems unlikely at this point, tip things towards conviction. And even if it is not won, the more clearly this is fought, the more the stakes are clarified, the stronger position we will be in for the ongoing fight we will then have to take up to defeat and repudiate this fascism. The road to capitulation in advance leads where? Potentially past concentration camps, past death camps, to a real existential peril to humanity. Before January 6th, we were confronted by a fascist movement in power here and rising around the world. And it's not going away quietly because the conditions bringing it into being have not gone away. As revolutionary leader Bob Avakian has analyzed, global warming is not only threatening humanity, but disrupting the rule of American empire. Heightened globalization is ripping up and spitting out communities, regions, even whole countries across the global south, while tearing up the social fabric right here in the belly of the beast, all pushing the gaping wounds of capitalism, imperialism to extremes. Fascism is one possible solution to many of these contradictions in the interests of the American empire. While the fascist has been voted out, the fascism hasn't been removed. And now, more than possibly ever before, this country is full of fascists, millions of them. If the fascist base were the majority, we would still need to take action to stop them. But the fact is that the fascist social base is a minority, both in terms of the population and now that's reflected in the Senate, House, and executive branch. But this only matters if this power is acted upon. We don't know how this will turn out, but we need to take a lesson from Bob Avakian. The politics of the possible is the politics of the monstrosity. To adhere to or acquiesce in the politics of the possible is to support and actually to facilitate monstrosity. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America.
To begin, I just want to say that this is, of course, a political discussion, but simply to say the word politics right now is to somehow or another, in modern times, to pretend like you're playing some sort of a game. And one of the things I've been very disturbed by over the last couple of weeks, and particularly the last couple of days, has been this idea of whether or not this impeachment trial is smart politics, or, we keep reading these articles now from people among the Democratic Party saying they're not so sure that they should have witnesses, they should spend a lot of time on this, considering there's a foregone conclusion what's going to happen. But when I say politics, I'm not talking about this game of politics. I'm not talking about what is smart, what's practical, what's going to make an agenda happen. What I'm talking about is how a group of disparate people come together and decide how to live in a shared society. And that's what's in danger right now. This is the actual problem that we're having, is that we have reached a point where shared society is in the middle of a political, social, and existential crisis. And I want to state very clearly, because there's been, for the past month and 2 days, there's been a concerted effort by politicians, media, pundits, to frame this whole thing as a weird aberration that took place on, January 6th. And it just so happened that there was a riot that spilled into the US Capitol. And it's really terrible what happened, but we've moved past it, and we've turned the page, and Donald Trump is behind us, and now we can unify and move on. That's unfortunately a fairy tale. We have a real problem in this country. And I want to go ahead and say, first and foremost, what happened on January 6th. And this is the way history will look at it if we have history. The President of the United States of America, after fomenting one conspiracy theory after another for years, and then engaging in a fascistic, white supremacist paranoid conspiracy theory, sicked his radicalized followers on his own vice president and the legislative branch of the United States of America. He declared war on the government of the United States and tried to carry out a violent coup. We were incredibly lucky that it didn't move further. That's not a pretty picture. That's one of the reasons we're trying to move on from it. We're trying to pretend because there's a new president that everything will be totally fine, but it's not. There is a fascistic movement in this country. And I have to tell you, If this happens and he is acquitted, and there isn't an actual good faith, full-throated prosecution of him that shows the country, by the way, that not only was it a lie that Donald Trump told, but that it was a weaponized lie that the wealthy and the powerful helped him tell. If that conspiracy theory, which by the way is just an ancestor of other conspiracy theories that have led to fascistic takeovers, Holocaust, mass killings, and mass oppressions, if we don't actually deal with that, we're going to go back to sleep. We're going to forget that January 6th happened and how it happened and who made it happen. And I have to tell you, we're not going to be lucky enough to have somebody come after Donald Trump who is as incompetent and cowardly as he is. There are groups of people in this country with a lot of money and a lot of power in the Republican Party, which, by the way, has no platform. It has no plan to help Americans besides to mislead Americans they've exploited and take their anger and push it elsewhere and weaponize them and radicalize them. They will find somebody who can approximate all of the characteristics that made Donald Trump, but that person will have an actual ideology and that person will actually be disciplined. And I'm really glad that when Sam read that statement that this came up. We are reaching a real giant, bigger moment of crisis in the United States of America. Our economy is falling apart. People are becoming more alienated and more radicalized by the day. And global climate change is a catastrophe that is going to not only destroy our economy, it's going to throw our politics into further tumult, and it's also going to lead, and I'm sorry, but what we saw at the border is only going to be worse with millions upon millions of climate refugees. If we don't nip this thing in the bud, if we don't call it what it is, if we don't fight against this like our very lives depend on it, because they do, we are going to be shit out of luck when the next iteration reaches, because this situation has been created, it has been fomented, it has been absolutely tended to, and we have to deal with this like the actual crisis that it is.
All right, so that was just two excerpts from what was really a very rich program on Monday night. It featured the constitutional lawyer, Eric Seitz, the actor and activist, Francis Fisher, the writer and educator, Paul Street, who's also on the editorial board of Refuse Fascism. Again, we encourage everybody to go watch the full program at refusefascism.org. But I think what we saw brought alive very vividly, even in those brief excerpts, the stakes of the need for a conviction of this fascist white supremacist coup attempt right out in the open, but also what this has to do with forces that are not going away. I wonder, Andy, if you had anything you wanted to react to in what we just saw.
Yeah, well, I thought it was a very good forum, and people should watch it. You know, it just brings out how sharp the existential crisis we face in different dimensions are. One, you do have, let me put it this way, there's three futures that face humanity. One almost succeeded, which would have been a second term for Donald Trump. And I think in the forum, Paul Street made the point that had it not been for COVID, Trump probably would have won, and it would have been the full out consolidation of fascism, which, as Samantha brought out, is a different form of rule, a much more open terroristic form of rule. The other form of rule, the other future, is what we have under Biden, which is the same system. And in this New Year's statement that we've been talking about, you know, Bob Avakian makes the point that this is not the choice between Biden and Trump was a necessary choice to make for Biden to defeat Trump in the polls by a large margin. But these are representatives of the same system that has been leading to the destruction of the environment, to the refugee crisis, to the all these things that Jared was talking about, and you know, and that Samantha brought out. This fascism is white supremacy, patriarchy, xenophobia, America first. But there is a third future too, which needs to be brought into the picture, and that is the future of an actual revolution to get beyond a system that continually regenerates fascism. So you know, that's some of just you know, I just thought it was very rich and. Something that people need to get into.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that I would really encourage people to get further into this statement from BA that you're talking about is that we did buy some time by getting Trump out. But all of these things that gave rise to this fascism, and frankly, even in its bourgeois democratic form of rule, even under Biden, the nature and dynamics of this system are hurtling humanity towards really a catastrophe. And so there is a need and there is a way to bring about a different world, to make a revolution, and to take up the fight against this fascism from the perspective of putting an end to the system that has no future worth living for humanity.